Welcome to the Following Films podcast. I'm your host, Chris Maynard. Today we have a special episode featuring Stephan Peterson and Sonya Ballantyne, co-directors of The Death Tour. The Death Tour is a road trip movie like none other, which takes viewers on an epic journey to a part of the world rarely captured on camera. Executive produced by wrestling legend Chris Jericho, audiences experience these remote communities through the wrestlers' eyes as they drive through the frozen tundra, sleep on ring mats after shows, and face their inner demons. Some hope that surviving the Death Tour will propel them to wrestling superstardom, while others, their bodies battered and scarred, head north for one last chance to hear the roar of an adoring crowd. Before we begin our conversation with Stephan and Sonya, I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsor, Bookman's. As an independent bookstore, they believe in the magic of storytelling and the cinematic arts. If you're looking to expand your collection of films, music, or books, visit your nearest Bookman's and discover something truly wonderful. And if you haven't already, please follow the Following Films podcast on Spotify to show your support. This will help us to continue to bring you in-depth conversations with the talented individuals who shape the world of cinema. The Death Tour premieres at Slam Dance on January 19th. Hope you enjoy the show. Thanks. Hey, Sonya. Hey, Stephan.
Hello.
Thank you so much for taking the time to do this today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Pleasure's ours.
Well, okay, so I gotta be perfectly honest. I think a lot of people will probably approach this in the same way that I did, where I don't know anything about wrestling. I don't really care for wrestling. Don't give a shit about wrestling at all. Doesn't mean anything to me. Fortunately, Annie told me to stop being a jerk and watch this movie because she knew I'd love it. And so I took her up, and I realized that this isn't, while it takes place in the world of wrestling, this is by no means a movie about wrestling. I think that this is really a deeply human story about people who are trying to find themselves and this community at large that I learned so much about through this film, who are looking for moments of joy in a very difficult circumstance. So congratulations on the film. I think you did something really wonderful here. But I just wanted to preface that before the first question, which is, how did you become aware of this story? Because I had never heard of this before. And that's for both of you. So
Go ahead, Steph. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Chris, I was not a wrestling fan either, man. Like you, bit of a snob, perhaps. You didn't poo-pooed it, perhaps. As a kid, played on trampolines and was like,
Sure.
suplexing my neighbors, but came across it by fluke while on another project up in northern Manitoba, and just kind of came across it by fluke. We were in this small town, took us 4 days to get there over frozen lakes. We had to pack our own food. We were sleeping in our truck. We were not expecting the traveling circus to come through town. And sure enough, one night I'm rolling out my sleeping bag in the back of our SUV. And then this swarm of kids come past the car and head over to the small town local community center. So we take a look, what's going on? And wrestling is in town. So, bought a ticket, watched the show, and couldn't believe my eyes. I mean, the gym was packed. There was Huskies breaking in to escape the blizzard outside. Kids were throwing crushed pop cans and nickels at these grown adults who were older than me and of all ages in spandex, breaking their necks off the top rope there to put on a show for these kids. So obviously I was intrigued, and the next morning found out that this was not just a one-stop situation. There was a 2-week journey, and they were doing this every night. I couldn't imagine that. And once I got home, I did the research and quickly figured out that this was actually a pillar of Canadian wrestling, indie wrestling. It's been going on for 50 years, and it shaped the careers of many greats. So, it was pretty clearly a great story at that point for me. And so I started, for the next couple of years, just, did what I could to try to get out there on the tour, learn about the business, and spoke to, 50 wrestlers who had either done it or were hoping to do it. And really they all kind of, all of their stories were really inspiring. This was their passion, and, it had helped them in one way or another, which was I found kind of unique how wrestling seemed to help people seem to find wrestling at this time and at this crossroads in their lives. And but like their dedication to the craft and to their passion was what was really inspiring. They were all like, they would drop everything anytime the phone rang for a match, and if it meant, like not chasing a safe career or a conventional 9-to-5 career, but just, doing what they had to do to make ends meet so that when the phone rang, they could drop everything and go put on a show for 20 people at the Legion, 3 towns over. It was, yeah. So that's how I got into it.
How about you, Sonya? How did you become aware of this?
I was always a wrestling fan ever since I was a little girl. I wanted to be Bret Hart or marry into his family because I just wanted to have my last name be Hart. I had encountered the Death Tour when I was a kid, when I met Tony Condello and Adam Copeland, who wrestled in WWE as Edge. And it was just really fascinating to me how accessible wrestling was. Like, I could be a wrestler, and it was my intention to become one until I was like about 13 and really examining my adulthood and where I wanted to go, and realized that there was a very real glass ceiling for female wrestlers, and that it wasn't like I wasn't able to be Bret Hart just because there was no Bret Hart that was a woman yet. And so when I came onto this project, I knew that I wanted to tell like a part of the story that didn't really get told a lot, because like in wrestling circles, this tour is well known about in most circles. But people often talk about the jokes that are pulled on it, or like how Jericho was on it, or how Kenny Omega fell through the ice and stuff like that. Like nobody knew about nobody had ever placed the tour in the context of the communities it goes to, because like people are always like, oh yeah, it's a 50-year tour, but they don't know how a 50-year tour continues to go on like this. And so it was really fascinating to see like how much wrestling meant to the communities when we went up there.
Well, and I think that's really the magic trick of this film that makes it work, as gives it the power that it has. Because I was anticipating more of a process film. This was going to be about exactly what you were saying. What does it take to put this on, to go through this tour, the grueling 2 weeks and these horror stories and that. And you have elements of that here, of course. There is that part of it where I think that for somebody like me who knows nothing about it, I think that that's pretty fascinating just even to hear that part of it. But then the human story and seeing these kids, when the way they react to this, if you don't well up when they're all grabbing on to these wrestlers, I don't think you have a heart. I can't imagine not being moved by this. And I was always a music guy growing up. I loved live music, and I loved theater, and I loved film. And so these were communal events, and now I get wrestling. Like, I get that. I thought of it as a BS sport. And it's theater sport. This is a live performance. That's what this is. And I totally get that now in a different context than I ever did before. So I live very close to Mexico. I live like 60 miles north of Mexico. And there's a whole tradition of wrestling here as well that does make it up to my area sometimes. And I really want to go see it now. So you've had that impact on me for sure. But could you talk a little bit about that thing that you were talking about there, Sonya, with centering this on the community, and when did that come into this story? Today's episode of the Following Films podcast is brought to you by Bookmans. Do you have books, movies, or music gathering dust on your shelves? Give them a new life at Bookmans. They gladly accept trade-ins and buy used media. Clear up some space for new artistic journeys, while knowing that your books, movies, and music will find a loving home. On my latest trip to Bookmans, I found a copy of the 1946 film, Beauty and the Beast. This film is an absolute classic and a cinematic treasure that has stood the test of time, captivating audiences for generations now. This film is extraordinary. It weaves a spellbinding tale that touches the heart and ignites your imagination. From the very first frame, the exquisite artistry and attention to detail transport you to a mesmerizing realm of fantasy and wonder. Cocteau's visionary direction infuses each scene with poetic elegance, and it allows the story to unfold in a visually stunning and emotionally resonant manner. One cannot help but be captivated by the production design and breathtaking cinematography. The opulent castle, with its haunting corridors and magical rooms, becomes a character in itself, And this isn't like when people say New York is a character in the film. This is a literal character in the film. The ethereal lighting and intricate set pieces create a visual feast that immerses the audience in a realm of enchantment. What truly sets this rendition of Beauty and the Beast apart is its ability to delve beyond the surface and explore the complexities of human nature. The film delves into themes of love, sacrifice, and the transformative power of acceptance. It reminds us that true beauty lies within, and that appearances can be deceiving. The allegorical elements presented throughout the story add depth and thought-provoking layers, making it a timeless tale with universal resonance. Beauty and the Beast, it's nothing short of a triumph when it comes to storytelling and craftsmanship. A true cinematic gem that continues to captivate audiences even after decades. There's very few things you can see that were made 80 plus years ago, or almost 80 years now, I guess, if I'm doing my math correctly, that still hold up. That stands as a testament to the power and imagination and the enduring appeal of a tale as old as time. If you seek a film that transports you to a world of magic, look no further than this timeless masterpiece. I cannot recommend the film highly enough, and recommend that you go to your local Bookman's to unearth your new favorite film. Remember, Bookman's has your cool covered. Enjoy the rest of the show.
Well, I hope Steph doesn't mind if I talk about that briefly. Steph came to me because he saw that there was a part of the story that he couldn't tell or didn't feel I don't want to speak or put into his words, so I hope I get this right, but he didn't feel comfortable telling the Indigenous part of the story without somebody who was Indigenous. And I really appreciated that when he approached me about it, because I knew I didn't want to, I have seen wrestling documentaries and a lot of them follow the same format, follow the same tropes, follow the same stories. And I was like, I want to make a I don't want to make a capital W wrestling documentary. I want to make a capital F film, out of this. And I want to take it seriously, and I want to do everything about to make sure that it focuses on why these people go to these specific communities. Why is it still popular up there? And why do people keep still doing it? Why do these wrestlers clamor for spots with Tony to come on these tours? And so it was something I was really touched by, because I think that's where the best partnerships with me and Steph came out of, just because the honesty was always there. And so that was something I wanted to bring to the film as well, always being honest about their intentions and honest about themselves as people, and focusing on why it's so difficult to be a wrestler, but also why they love it so much. And so that was something that I think that was, even though I'm a huge wrestling fan, I had been looking down on it for so long before we went on the death tour. And I was I was poo-pooing it as we went up there, but then it really renewed my love for wrestling when we went up there. So I was just very happy to take part in being able to focus on a part of the story that hadn't been told before. I think that's what's special about it.
So, Steph, can you touch on that also? The idea that you brought in Sonya for this because you knew there was a bigger piece of the story that you wanted to tell, and just how that came together, and how did you find her?
Yeah, well, it was a great story. I mean, this project had been something we've been chipping away at for maybe a year or two, just trying to get it, about 2 years, trying to get it, just see if there's something here. I went up and shot a sizzle reel with my colleague Joe on the tour. But then, as soon as we started getting a little broadcaster interest, and we knew that this project, it had some legs, that's when we knew it was okay, well, this tour, although it's, the focus is the story of these, most at the time, mostly white wrestlers, this tour is going through these First Nations communities. And so we're also telling their story as well. So, it was pretty clear. We got to bring, we need someone who can speak to, who's from those communities. And then when we started researching and looking for directors who were from the area. We'd spoken to a few, and then we came across Sonya, who was also a wrestling fan. So right away she got top of list, but she rejected the first email, and so while the team was oh man, that sucks, it's no, we need Sonya. She doesn't take any guff. This is who we need on on this project. So I made a follow-up call, and the rest is history there. But so that's how we got Sonya. It was, we knew she was she wasn't taking any shit, and and knew these two worlds in a way that I didn't, obviously. So, and it's been honestly like a really wonderful collaboration. So,
well, I think there's a good piece of advice for anybody in that. If you ever want a job, just say no first. Just reject. Nah, I'm good. I don't need it. And especially in the world of film, not many people are rejecting offers. So can you talk a little bit about that? You get this initial email and you're like, oh God, no, I'm done.
I think it was because I was initially worried that there is this thing in Canada where a lot of people will get Indigenous creators on just as like a checklist for funding. And so I was worried that was what was happening. Not that that happened here, but like I was just like, and I really honestly wanted to focus on writing, like TV writing. And I think that was the first conversation me and Steph had, because he was like, I want to go on this tour. And I'm like, okay, first off, do you know why they call it the Death Tour? Like, like specifically, are you aware? And he told me he had gone on it, and he had seen it. He knew how difficult it was. And I was like, oh, and I started to really I don't want to say, I do want to say, I began to trust Steph just because he was always so forthright and honest with me. And that is very rare in the film community, because you're as an Indigenous creative, especially as a woman, you often have your guards up and you're constantly preparing for fights before they even happen, and you're just like expecting to have to justify choices. And it was never the case with Steph. And so I was like, every single time I've been pleasantly surprised. We were going to bring on I won't say their name, but we were going to bring on a wrestling historian, and I told Steph that he would have to interview them, because this person notoriously is a sexist and a little bit of a racist. And Steph just looks at me and goes, Sonya, why would we have anyone like them on the film? And I'm like, right. And so it was very fun to work with him, just because he also helped me realize that I could break some of the rules in the wrestling history, just because people are respected doesn't mean that they deserve carte blanche to treat people terribly. And I think that's something I also learned from the wrestlers we followed this tour.
Yeah, it's pretty difficult to get anything made, and when you have questions you have things that are brought up, there's doubt that's sown frequently, even if you are a white male, but then you throw in this other layer where you have to question it. Is this doubt being sown because I'm a minority? Is it because I'm a woman? Or is it because it's a bad idea? What's the root of this right here? And that's such a terrible place to be in, where you have to question that. And I'm glad that you found a good working relationship with Steph on this. Could you talk a little bit about that, of having ideas and just being open to the idea of getting them shot down like that stuff? There's a lot of people that it's a fragile business with your ego, that it can be crushed time and time again in the film industry. Talk about being open to new ideas like that.
Well, we had a great relationship in the sense that, I come with a lot of experience, or my experience is a lot in the execution of it, of the shooting of the documentary and the putting it together and the research. And then Sonya comes with all the in-depth knowledge of these kind of two worlds we were going into. And so it kind of it worked, because we had kind of divided the work, speaking for the production, the actual shoot itself, which lasted, essentially 2 weeks. It was really nice, because while I was able to focus on following a scene and physically trying to get the sound to good, the images and the pictures and all that, Sonya and I would then be, or Sonya would be figuring out the next story, talking to the community, talking to the wrestlers, figuring out what are the next, what are some storylines that are actively happening. I mean, it's a verite doc that we're following what's happening on screen. It's, the intention is always to really make it feel almost like a fiction, other than a little bit of talking heads for context. But, so it was really fun, because, we were constantly splitting up and getting back together. Okay, what's going on here? What's the approach? What do we think? What does this mean? Why is that important? And Sonya was able to just kind of explain to me so many little wrestling stories and aspects and nuances that this is a big thing. And I mean, we could make 2 more films out of what didn't make the film, about, we could have gone more into the, the inside wrestling of it. And so so it was a really nice, it was my first time working with the co-director, but it was perfect. So,
well, I would have had, I think, a similar inclination to you, where I could have done a whole film about just them setting up their own rings and driving that long and doing that. And it's just such a hell. And I think that would have been a mistake, because there was a much more interesting film other than this aspect of it that is pretty fascinating and pretty, when you hear the Death Tour, it's that, okay, it's earning that name. I just, so people understand, like, especially people in the United States, who we tend to be, unfortunately, fairly myopic, and we don't really pay attention to the rest of the world as much as we should. But Manitoba, where you're going through, this is incredibly rural, where the pathways are only open for a few weeks a year, where you're having to drive over ice, frozen lakes you're driving over to get through there. And I'm a desert rat. So the idea of that is frightening to me. Like, I can't believe you guys do that. I can't believe that. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about just that part of it?
Well, feeling like, I am from Manitoba. Like, I grew up in northern central Manitoba, and on a reserve that was isolated, and it was way more isolated out there than I had ever experienced. Like, I had been to Bangladesh, where it took like 6 hours to drive 100 kilometers, and it took, like, we were driving 6 hours for like to make like basically 80 kilometers. Like, it was bizarre, because I hadn't imagined that places like that still existed, never mind in Canada. And like, even though I'm Indigenous and like I had grown up in that area, it was just so bizarre to me that like we were still allowing people to have to put up with like paying $150 for water and stuff like that. And so it really opened my own mind as well, because like I remember going up there and being like, nothing's going to shock me. I grew up like this. And then having to realize that things were still very slow to evolve up there, specifically around Indigenous culture, like in Indigenous spirituality. And so it was just really eye-opening to learn that the way my reserve was in like 40 years ago is basically how some reserves are up there now. And so it was really good to meet the kids, just to have like, to know that as long as kids exist, there's always going to be people shaking the trees and like ensuring that things progress.
Yeah, thank God for people that are younger, and they're not complacent, that they, I've grown used to the world as much as I might hate certain aspects of it. And thank God there's kids that just won't put up with the bullshit. So we need them. But I know we're out of time, and I just got to tell you how much I really enjoyed this film, and I highly, highly recommend this to people. I think wrestling fans will have a ton that they can dive into here. And I also think that people that are like me, that never cared about wrestling, that will find if you want a documentary that's powerful, human based, I think you could do a lot worse than this one. This is a great little film. So congratulations to both of you. You got something special here.
Time enough to figure you out. Time enough to write this down. Wish me luck, give me hope.